I want to take a few minutes on the kind of things that I consider, this is really opinion, real opinion section. Not that I have not expressed some opinions already, but this is deep opinion section. What I call missed opportunities. Missed opportunities. Okay, let's talk about Richmond Parkway Section 1. Okay, that's here. This is the part that was built of Richmond Parkway. This is the part that wasn't. Now this is the green belt. Well, the green belt, this is the 1960s. The green belt was green because most of it had been acquired for the right-of-way of the Richmond Parkway. There was a lot of trees. I mean, you didn't know that if you went out there. And the design for it, you're familiar with the topography of Staten Island. It's a lot of hills. So if you had, here's Toad Hill, the highest point in Staten Island. It's also the highest point on the northeastern seaboard. Come down like this. The Verrazano Narrows Bridge is here, and the Outer Bridge Crossing is down this way. And this was done sort of as a typical profile of an expressway. You had balancing, cut and fill. So you had a lot of impact on the ground. A lot of trees had to go, a lot of water courses were disturbed, a lot of construction impacts on the ground. There was an idea which I surfaced at the time, actually, not on behalf of the Port Authority, on behalf of me. There's anybody here ever hear of a landscape architect named Lawrence Alprin? He was based in the San Francisco area. He did a lot of work. He designed the forecourt fountain in Portland, and he designed an approach to the Golden Gate Bridge in the Presidio. And he used this idea. He was calling it the highway in the treetops. And what he did, which I adapted to this area, was you put the highway up here, around columns. And this is a tunnel, rather than an open cut. It costs more to do this, but this is context sensitive. This is done in Europe all the time. You can see long viaducts in Europe over valleys. These columns would be spaced further apart than they would based on engineering analysis. So you minimize the impact on the ground. You build this from the ground up and out. This has been done, for example, on the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina. They built just like this, which is a very sensitive environmental area. And you eliminate certain interchanges. There are many ways you can do this to make it have minimal impact on the ground surface. That idea never went anywhere. It was forwarded to New York State DOT, but they never did anything with it. But that was a missed opportunity. So basically, you might have had a complete Richmond Parkway instead of an incomplete Richmond Parkway. Another one, let's talk about Westway versus 9A in New York. Now here, I think if you look at page 84 to 88 of the handout, okay, I guess the easiest way to get at that, it's incompletely reproduced here, page 85. If you look at page 85, that was an article I did in a local newsletter of the Institute of Transportation Engineers called A Tale of Two Cities. A Tale of Two, the whole title is not there. It's supposed to say A Tale of Two Cities. It's a takeoff on Charles Dickens. Because the two cities that I was talking about, you can read it at your leisure, were New York and Boston, New York City and Boston. Let me just frame it very simply. In New York City, we had the Westway Proposal. In the Westway Proposal, the state had gotten approval from the Federal Highway Administration to put it on the interstate system. So the funding was there, 90-10 funding to build it. It was going to be built outboard into the river, covered over with a park. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Westway Proposal. It was going to replace the old West Side Highway. There was a group of people, I can tell you the names, but we won't get into that, who were opposed to it. Now, even though it was not going to create any additional capacity into Manhattan, because no one was proposing to increase the crossings into Manhattan, either on the Hudson River or on the East River. But they said that this is now going to allow trucks. This is no good. We don't want it. It's going to cause increased pollution. I'm not sure how it would do that, because most of it was going to be underground with ventilation facilities. But in any case, they defeated the idea, and it was traded in, quote unquote, for other projects, and Westway never got built, and instead the 9A Boulevard was built that you see along the west side of Manhattan. By contrast, in Boston, they had this proposal to depress the Central Artery, multi-billion-dollar project. You know it as the Big Dig. They had two opposing sort of different camps. People who were in favor of depressing the Central Artery, I'll call them the environmental group. Then you had the highway group, which wanted to build the tunnel to Logan Airport to supplement the existing tunnels, the Sumner and Callahan Tunnel, which eventually became the Ted Williams Tunnel that's in place now. They were groups that never talked to each other. They were kind of opposing viewpoints. But somehow, politically, they got together. And they said, well, if we get together, they didn't have the funding. They had the idea, but not the funding. We'll go talk to Tip O'Neill in the Congress, and we'll get the money. We'll get it designated on the interstate system. And then we can have our depressing of the Central Artery, and we can have the Ted Williams Tunnel. And that's what happened. So that's why I meant about a tale of two cities. It was a contrast. In New York City, they had the money, but they couldn't get the community backing. In Boston, they got the community backing, and they went out and got the money and got it accomplished. Now, and then about 9A, I don't know if I have it here. On 9A, if you've been over on the west side of Manhattan, there was a bicycle and pedestrian path along the Hudson River. That's very nice, but in the Westway proposal, that would have been completely within a park along the river. The one for 9A is right along West Street. You can call it 9A, I call it West Street. It's not a highway, it's all the signals that are there. It's a boulevard. And a year or two ago, I forget, there were 1 or 2 fatalities. A bicycle rider was killed because there's a signal where the roadway crosses the bicycle path. Somebody didn't stop for the signal. I don't know whose fault it was, but the result was somebody got killed. So I maintain, again, opinion, that they would have been much better off with Westway because the bicycle and pedestrian path would have been completely separated from the roadway. And in fact, I was at a meeting at the City of New York, Museum of the City of New York, where his last name is Benepe. I think he's still the commissioner of parks in the city. There's a father and son. I never remember which one was Adrian, which one was Barry. Whoever was the parks commissioner, Commissioner Benepe. And so we had a discussion about Westway, and I made this point that I've just made with you in the Q&A afterward. And he got up in this public session, and he was one of the leaders of the anti-Westway group, incidentally, in those days. He says, you know, we made a mistake. He says, we probably should not have opposed Westway. It probably would have been a better solution to what we have now. You know, crying over spilled milk. But anyway, this is under my missed opportunities kind of section. Then we have the I-80, and I got to bring it closer to New Jersey now. The I-80 HOV lanes. Anybody here ever hear of the HOV lanes on I-80? I mean, long gone, right? But I want to talk about that a little bit, because maybe we can learn something from that. Here's I-80 up here leading to the George, up here, I-80. And there was a proposal, and they actually put in HOV lanes on a short section of I-80. I think it was about a 15-mile section. There was also a section on I-287. I want to talk about the I-80 piece. Now, at that point, there already were HOV lanes on the Long Island Expressway, which is still there and operating quite successfully. The difference is, in my opinion, it was mishandled by New Jersey DOT. Because for one thing, they put that fourth lane in, or it was in, and for a year before it was operated as an HOV lane, there was a dashed line next to it, and it was just a sign, it was a regular lane. And then one day, they went out and, okay, now it's an HOV lane. Well, everybody had gotten used to using it as a regular lane. They didn't change the marking, it was still a dashed line. So I don't think they handled it maybe as well as New York did, because in New York, and you'll see this in a slide later, under the managed lanes section, they have a separate lane, there's a painted buffer, there are specific points where you go into and out of the HOV lane. It was handled entirely differently. I guess I maintain that handled differently, these days you might still have an HOV lane on I-80, but I just don't think it was handled well. Opinion. Okay, then there was another section, this is still under the missed opportunities, where there was a proposal on the Cross Westchester Expressway up, where are we? I guess I'll show it on this map. Cross Westchester, right here. There's Tappan Zee Bridge. No, that's it. Where is it up here? Here we are. Throughway, here it is. Cross Westchester Expressway, which leads from the Tappan Zee Bridge. There was a proposal to put an HOV lane, a bus HOV lane along the Cross Westchester Expressway. It would have served a lot of the office developments that are along there, tremendous amount of office development on there. It would have served them quite flexibly. You could have sent different bus services to different developments. That was killed by the Tri-State Transportation Committee. What are they called? The Tri-State that committee? Commission. No, not a commission, no. It's a private group, it's not a commission. I think it's... No, they have no authority. They're a committee, I think. Campaign. I knew it wasn't a commission, you're right. The commission, your predecessor, the Tri-State Regional Planning Commission, went out of business a long time ago. That was a commission, okay? Anyway, they opposed it strongly. They went to the governor, they got the governor's ear, they killed it, all right? How, I'm just jumping around here, but how the Long Island Expressway HOV lanes ever got done, I don't know. Because the Tri-State Transportation Campaign was opposed to that also. I think I know how that got done. You had a very good political angel for that. He's dead now, unfortunately. State Senator Norman Levy in New York State. He was the head of the Senate Transportation Committee, and that was his baby. He was from Long Island, and he wanted that done, and he got it done. You need somebody, at the political level to get these things done. Sometimes these projects turn on those kinds of things. No big revelation here, I don't think. Yes?
Under your missed opportunity, another one across the Clearview Expressway.
Okay. Clearview, yes. I didn't put that in because I have another one to talk about, but you're right. Here's the Throgs Neck Bridge. Here's the Clearview Expressway. It was supposed to eventually go all the way down in Queens and merge with the Nassau Expressway here near Kennedy Airport. It dead ends now at Hillside Avenue. In fact, before they fixed the profile, they had a couple of fatal accidents. Because what happened is, the profile was designed to go over Hillside Avenue, and then all of a sudden it was determined that it's not going to go past there. So they had two ramps that would come down Hillside Avenue, which are never designed for high speed. They didn't have the proper sight distance for the speed. And so the state had to go in after these fatal accidents. And they couldn't modify the profile. What they did is they narrowed it down to 1 or 2 lanes. So it slowed the traffic down, and it seems to operate well. But in any case, that is why you get overloads on the Grand Central, because it dead ends at the Grand Central Parkway, and you get tremendous congestion on the Cross Island. And of course the trucks who are going to Kennedy Airport, coming from up here, They had no place to go. They have to go here, and then you wonder why the Van Wyck is overloaded. You know, big mysteries here. Anyway, yes, that was a missed opportunity, but that was when Mr. Moses was running out of steam politically. He got deposed by Governor Rockefeller. Yes.
Yeah, your missed opportunities are, what about anything that is not road related? I mean, transit.
Yes.
There was when New York was bankrupt, basically, they basically threw everything that they were going to do to expand the transit system, the rail, and it just all got done. None of it ever got built.
Mhm.
Very little of it.
Some of it got done.
Very little piece, like Archer's, Parsons.
Right, Parsons.
Yeah, but that's about it.
Yeah, I can talk about something before then in terms of a missed opportunity for transit, for rail transit. And this is in the Power Broker. If you look at the Van Wyck when it was built, it comes right down to Kennedy Airport. And there was a proposal at that time to put a subway line in the median to acquire the right-of-way. Because before that, now I'm talking about 1950s actually. The Van Wyck, there was no Van Wyck Expressway, there was a Van Wyck Boulevard. And they acquired right-of-way, they took houses and everything to build the Van Wyck Expressway. And the proposal at that time was acquire a little bit wider so that you have room to put two subway tracks in the median. That was killed by Robert Moses, that idea. And those are the best ideas, the ones that you can do it during the construction. But that didn't get done. So we came along later. This is the Port Authority now. And right here, parallel with the Van Wyck, is the abandoned right-of-way of the Rockaway line of the Long Island Railroad. People call it abandoned, I call it inactive. And in the 70s, the reason I call it inactive is I like to keep a positive viewpoint. Maybe we can use it for some activity. And so in the 70s and into the 80s, the Port Authority did extensive studies on using that right-of-way, looked at alternatives, looked at it for a subway, for a busway, which was called the JFK Transitway, which would have served not only the airport, but also would have had local stations to serve that area of Queens for transit, coming up to the subways. And that got killed. So there have been attempts to, eventually AirTrain was built along the Van Wyck. Again, I'm putting in deep opinion here. I think it was built on the wrong right-of-way. I mean, you could have built AirTrain in the Rockaway line right-of-way. Instead, you have AirTrain, and it would have come down to Kennedy, right here, right where Aqueduct is, except that now you have this thing up at 3 levels, above the cross streets, visual disturbance of the neighborhood, whereas it could have been fit within the existing right-of-way of the rail line, which is mainly depressed. I won't get into the reasons and all that. I'll talk to you separately about that if you'd like to know. Because I'm too close to that project, I guess. Anyway, those are some of the transit things that were attempted to be done. I mentioned across Westchester. Let's see. Another thing that you can think about. There is, when we do HOV lanes or even HOT lanes, what is the main objective of that? Is it fuel efficiency? That certainly is one of the objectives. But if you, let's say all the vehicles were not run on gasoline or on hydrocarbon fuels, because now we have clean pass with hybrid vehicles going in the HOV lanes, you still have effects of a lot of use of single occupant vehicles regardless of the fuel that's used. You have urban sprawl, you have that kind of thing. So you have to think about what the purpose is of some of the lanes that we have. And then we have a couple of other ideas. Let me come back to, we're going to get into some of this in the PowerPoint. Let me come back to this Cross Brooklyn Expressway. I'm going to put you, I want you to play a role right now. You're driving a tractor trailer, if you can imagine that, and you're coming up from Washington, or you're coming from Trenton, you're coming someplace from the south, and you're on the turnpike, which you would tend to be, and you want to come over to Long Island, either to Brooklyn, Queens, or further out on Long Island. And so you you have several options. I'll just put it in the form of a question. Remember now, you can't drive on a parkway. And I'll come over here because this has a more complete picture of the system. Anybody, tell me what route you would follow.
George Washington Bridge.
Okay, so you come up the turnpike, George Washington, and then what do you do to get down to, let's say, Sunrise Highway on Long Island, which is the truck route serving the entire south shore of Long Island. All right, you're on the George Washington Bridge. Where do you go? Where do you go from the George Washington Bridge?
You're in trouble.
Cross Bronx? Where else can you go? Or Deegan? Deegan is not good because you're going to come down to the Grand Central Parkway. So you have to take the Cross Bronx, the Whitestone, not the Whitestone, probably the Throg's Neck. Well, you can take the Whitestone because at least you can get down to the South Shore. If you take the Throg's Neck, you're just going to come to a dead end here, or you're going to have to come over on the Expressway somehow. Cross Island is no good for you. That's a parkway. You can come down this way. This is all Expressway, and you can get down to here, and then Van Wyck Expressway, really little used facility. We wonder why it's overloaded. And then you're on the North and South Conduit Avenue, which trucks can use, and that gets you out to the Sunrise Highway. How long do you think that'll take you? Now, what other option would you have? You're still on the turnpike here. Do you have any other options than coming up to the George Washington Bridge? Okay, the Goethals Bridge, Goethals, whatever. Staten Island Expressway, now you're at the Verrazano Bridge. Where do you go from there? Are you up a creek? Huh?
Up the creek.
Atlantic Avenue, maybe? With all the signals?
Yep.
Where do you go? Bell Parkway? No. Okay, so you beat your way up. I mean, people do this. That's the only option. You beat your way up. Where am I? Down here. The BQE, all lightly used roadways. BQE to the LIE, Long Island Expressway, lightly used roadway. Down to Van Wyck, and you're in the same position again. All very lightly used roadways. I have to tell you another interesting fact. New York City has a network of what they call truck routes. Truck routes. Most of them are designated on local streets. All right, so you're at the Verrazano, and this is Fort Hamilton Parkway, which is an arterial street right here, and it comes into New York Route 27, which is Linden Boulevard here, which New York 27 eventually goes along and becomes the conduits, North and South Conduit Avenue, and eventually becomes Sunrise Highway. So theoretically, you could follow, quote, Route 27. Don't try it, please. I mean, you'll knock over the trees on Linden Boulevard. The community will be up in arms. Not to mention that the New York City truck route map says that Fort Hamilton Parkway is not a truck route. It's the only thing, like a major route, but I talked to them about that. Oh no, the community would never have it. We can't have it designated as a truck route. Okay, so the other option you have, good luck, is to beat your way up to BQE from here, where am I? Here, BQE, and this is Atlantic Avenue, which eventually takes you to Conduit Boulevard, which brings you back into the conduits. Atlantic Avenue with all the signals running under the elevated Long Island Railroad, with all the loading and unloading that goes on along Atlantic. It's not a good picture. So that brings me back to the Cross Brooklyn Expressway. Now, a little known fact right here. When I say this, I don't know if this is true, but I may be the only person alive who knows what I'm going to tell you. This is not like Deep Throat or something, but it's interesting. When Robert Moses built something, when he was in charge of something, he always built for the future. It's like a lot of subway projects. Some of you may know Bob Olmsted, the late Bob Olmsted. And I talked with Bob a lot about some of the subway projects. And he could tell you where all the bell mouths were, where all the parts of tunnels that were started but never finished, that are still underground. Because when you built this piece, and there was going to be an extension, you built the beginning of it. It made sense. So you wouldn't have to come back and disturb the existing. Excuse me. Well, similar to that, when this piece of the Brooklyn Queens Expressway was built, coming off the Verrazano Bridge, it is now 3 lanes in each direction. And then there are side slopes coming up to 7th Avenue in Brooklyn, and I forget what the others, I think they're both called 7th Avenue, 7th Avenue North, 7th Avenue South. It's a very wide right-of-way. Again, a lot of them apartment houses had to be taken down to build that. But this is the cross-section of that right now, very oversimplified. If these are the 3-lane road, this is 3 lanes, this is 3 lanes, and there are side slopes in here. Oversimplified, but this is the case. Underneath these side slopes are retaining walls for another 3-lane roadway and another 3-lane roadway. Where you can just dig it out and you have the, and he built that then because that was going to be the beginning of the Cross Brooklyn Expressway. So in other words, right here, the beginning was going to be in here, and then it was going to run along 65th Street, along the Bay Ridge line, which is an existing freight rail line, very lightly used in Brooklyn, over here towards Kennedy Airport, and then out along this area to connect with Sunrise Highway. And it's the reason also that what appears to be a lane imbalance is not a lane imbalance when you come into Brooklyn from the Verrazano Bridge. The Verrazano Bridge has, let's say, coming into Brooklyn, 6 lanes, 3 on the upper level, 3 on the lower level. But what do you have to receive that in Brooklyn? You have the 3 lanes of the BQE. You have, let's say, a lane going down to the Belt Parkway, that's 4. You have some traffic itself locally at 92nd Street. It's like 4.5, 5 lanes. What happened to the, why is there no capacity to absorb it? The reason there isn't is because he was going to have the Cross Brooklyn to absorb that flow. So we will look at, I'll talk about later when we get to the slides, something that I've proposed for the last 15 years. It's called the Gateway Project, and it's a modern version of the Cross Brooklyn, which fits within the existing Bay Ridge line right-of-way. And we will look at that in greater detail because, in my opinion, with all of the problems, this is clearly one of the major missing links in the network, even considering, context-sensitive design, all the modern things, because it, unless we just want to continue the existing sorry state of what happens with freight transportation as well as other transportation, because other vehicles would use this, but we can get at that when we talk about the Gateway Project. And finally, of course, automated highways. Maybe eventually we'll get to automated highways, I don't know. We're getting more and more of that with the modern cars.